if you were to ask the entire ummah about what surah they could identify immediately upon recitation, any prayer, without any hesitation, right? I think Surah Ar-Rahman would be the one that everyone would pick.
Yasin's a close second.
Yasin's a close second, and we did talk about.
We used to joke about leading Taraweeh. You're not allowed to breathe when you're reading Surah Yasin on that night in Taraweeh. Because if you breathe for a half a second too long, an uncle from like the 8th row is going to scream.
For 3 masjids over. Yeah, he's going to try to correct. But Surah Rahman is interesting because it is one that, Shaykh, as we were talking just before this, there's not just the meaning which is compelling, but also even to a person who has zero understanding of anything in the Qur'an, which is a lot of people, but the power of the Qur'an being communicated in this moment through this surah is also the melody, the rhythm,
style and substance.
Style, yeah, and it shows you again the layers of beauty of the Qur'an. That even a person that doesn't have grammar, Arabic grammar or vocabulary can appreciate it and can enjoy it and can benefit from it. And we were talking a little bit about what Surah Ar-Rahman represents for us and how this is a surah in which Allah Ta'ala encapsulates so many different references to things that we should be grateful for. And that's why the theme of gratitude appears so many times in the surah. We were talking about 31 times, the phrase, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Shaykh, can you give us, both of you, Mufti and Shaykh, can you give us some deeper context? I know we just read the translation, right? Which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? But something asked 31 times, there's got to be something deeper than just tawqid. As they say in a lot of tafsirs, emphasis. There has to be something deeper than that. What are the thoughts that we have with regards to the nature of human beings, our struggle to be grateful, and Allah mentioning this challenge 31 times? Mufti Saab or Shaykh, either one of you.
Yeah, the obvious thing you mentioned is it's gratitude because, kafura, right? That the human being has a tendency to be ungrateful. We have short-term memories.
Why is that? Why do we find ourselves leaning into ingratitude?
So there's obviously going to be certain things that are inherent, that are kind of like baked in. The Qur'an talks about it, that Allah created us that way as part of our test. So that's a limitation that was a potential limitation that was embedded within us so that there's some kind of challenge and we have to overcome that. And then secondly, it's also environmental, nature and nurture.
So just to explain, the nature part of it is like how we like to sleep, but we have to wake up for Fajr. It's not that Allah is putting us at a disadvantage.
No.
No. But it's more so that there are certain natural constrictions.
That's right.
And some of those is that we tend to be, like you said, short-sighted.
That's right.
Have short-term memory.
That's right. And then the nurture part of it is so much in the environment and the culture and the world around us can sometimes breed, and cultivate a sense of ingratitude.
Even people we spend time around.
Yeah.
That's a big, unfortunate sort of...
in our day and age, that's where they're talking about, like with social media and our consumption of it, then when you're just like going through stories and posts of other people who are just basically putting up highlights of their life, a lot of times, as we've come to find out, they're not even really true. But nonetheless, you're just watching this highlight reel, and it just cultivates a sense of ingratitude within a person. Like, oh man, my life sucks.
Start to think about your own. It happens all the time, even on social media, but also in real life. You'll be hanging out with people and everyone's talking about how good their life is. And then you're like sitting there and you're like, I don't have anything to share. You don't realize that maybe it could be even like a little bit exaggerated, made up potentially. And there's a reason why even there's etiquette Islamically about how we have conversation and what we do share. Mufti Saab, 31 times Allah asks this question.
31 times.
What's going on? How do we take this? When you hear it, because people are listening to Tarawih over and over again. What should the listener be thinking about when they hear this phrase 31 times?
When I was young, my father is one of those people that you were referring to who doesn't have much of a deep relationship with the Qur'an. Linguistically, reading it, translation-wise, tafsir is like not even a question, But when we were young, he would play that Qasmi Sahib's recitation of the Qur'an with a green little cover on it. Wahiza for Qasmis, and he would put it in. And my first exposure to the Qur'an was Surah Yasin from those long car drives. Surah Rahman. And my dad, by the way, I cannot emphasize, he wasn't able to memorize much Qur'an. But till today, when I was becoming Hafid, I would sit in the car with him when he'd pick us up from Buffalo, because I finished off there in New York. So we'd have these 14-hour car drives back to Kentucky, 12-hour car drives back to Kentucky, and he would drive. So when we were driving, my brother and I, Shaykh Mubin and I, he would say to us that, okay, your turn, read Surah Yasin. Okay, your turn, read Surah Yasin. Not Surah Yasin. Your turn, read Surah Rahman.
Yeah.
Your turn. I think it's the Maimun uncle favorite surah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He said, okay, you read Surah Rahman. You read Surah Rahman. And then he would not know.
Because you know why? Because they do the math. They're like, I already know 31 of the ayat.
Yes.
So I got to jump start.
Yes.
It's all math.
Yes.
Every time it'd come to Fabi Ayyala, he'd start humming in. And then he would disappear.
Yeah.
And then come back in. He would disappear.
I know this line.
And then to the last ayah, he knew it.
Yeah.
Then when we come to the last ayah, he'd do like stop. And then he'd finish off the surah for us. So 31 times. I'll tell you this. The surah starts off with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going back to the basics. Like, we think of bounties and blessings as big, but Allah Azza wa Jalla is taking us outside of this world to the stars. He's taking us to the moon. He's taking us away from our galaxy.
Yeah.
There's a description of a scene in Surah Rahman, which might even be from another galaxy altogether.
Yeah.
Right? And so Allah Azza wa Jalla takes us to Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, the most compassionate.
Imam Razi actually makes the point, there's no other surah that begins with one of the attributes of Allah.
SubhanAllah.
It
It's
starts
unique.
with the attribute of Allah.
Ar-Rahman, period. That's it.
And I believe this is why Ibn al-Qayyim even made the argument that Ar-Rahman is like one of the distinct names of Allah.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
could even be his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
So it's like the most defining of his characteristics in terms of, because why? Because of course the compassion and the rahmah that's embedded in the name itself. SubhanAllah.
This surah is convinced to taking the believer out of a negative mindset.
SubhanAllah.
You just, after you're reading the surah, you won't be able to have a negative thought of Allah.
It's so interesting because in this day and age, we don't want to be reminded of the blessings of our lives when we are in a downtime. And it's almost become like a thing. You know,
What's the term?
don't gaslight me?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. So, someone's having a tough time and someone says to them, hey, you know what? After, of course, like giving them space,
Sure.
give them 5-10 minutes. To
But then
kind of
say,
vent.
mashallah, you're healthy, your kids are healthy.
Yeah, then you make the turn, right? I always tell people, like, don't make the turn too early.
Yeah,
Eventually, you have to make a turn.
Yeah, you got to wait for the cut in the median to make a U-turn.
Yes, exactly. So you let someone talk about how difficult their day was or their month or their year, whatever. But after 10, 15, 20 minutes of that venting, we have to make the turn.
Yep.
And the turn has to be back towards Allah, which is, but alhamdulillah, you're healthy. My mindset, this is me, maybe I'm just a little bit negative. I'm like, what's the worst?
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just had some food. I'm sitting on my couch. I'm worried about this and that. But alhamdulillah, look, I'm sitting in my home. Whether it be an apartment, whether it be a home, I'm sitting in my car. I'm not waiting at a bus stop. Or even if I'm waiting at a bus stop, I'm not walking. There's layers to this. And so, like you had just said, which is how beautifully, so Rahman is like the chapter which refuses to let the person stay permanently in a state of sadness. It brings them out of that sadness, and it actually zooms out, like you said, into the cosmos.
It forces us to a response. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he was reading it, the companions didn't respond at all. He read the surah, right? And all the Sahaba sat there silently 31 times. فَبِأَيَّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ فَبِأَيَّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And then he says to them, what happened? I read the same surah in front of the jinn, and they were buzzing. مَا مِن شَيْءٍ بِنِعْمَتِكَ رَبَّنَا نُكَذِّبُ. Every time the Prophet of Allah said that, and which of the favors of your Lord do you deny? And by the way, the phrasing of the sentence of that ayah is beautiful because it's a question.
Yeah.
It's not a statement.
Yes.
It's a question.
It could have been, you should not deny any of the favors of Allah.
Which ones are you going to deny?
Yeah.
Which ones are you going to deny?
Almost under the assumption that you are denying them, because you're not fully appreciating them.
Yeah.
So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying this, and the jinn are responding by saying, مَا مِن نِعْمَةٍ.
Yeah, none.
مَا مِن نِعْمَةٍ. Like the negation is just beautiful if you look at it linguistically.
Not a single one.
رَبَّنَا نُكَذِّبُ. That we are going to deny. So now, in the opening ayat of Surah Rahman, Allah Azza wa Jal lays out some of His blessings. Allama al-Qur'an Allamahul bayan. What comes to your mind when you hear this? When you see Allah Azza wa Jal mentioning these two things as His opening blessings? Allama al-Qur'an, Allamahul bayan. And then after that, there's some description, but these two blessings Allah points out specifically to us. I gave you two things.
And there's something in between, right? There's the idea that Allah Ta'ala mentions that He created us.
خلق الإنسان.
Even in your creation.
Yes.
Right? So it's almost like there's a 360 view developing here now. That Allah Ta'ala is saying that He taught you Qur'an, created you, and then taught you how to articulate, how to speak, how to express.
Yes.
So it's so interesting, subhanAllah, when the human being, like you're saying, the surah didn't start with things like, oh, look at the food on your plate, look at this. It's talking about like almost existential blessings. You know, but Shaykh, Mufti Sahib, you mentioned this, and I wanted, just before we dive into this topic, Shaykh, I wanted you to kind of give us a little bit of thought about what's the nature of the sequencing here.
Yeah, so
because you would think that Allah would begin by saying, created a human being, taught them Qur'an, taught them how to speak. But it starts with, taught them Qur'an.
Yeah.
You know, then says, created human beings, then says, taught them speech, or the ability to articulate. Why is the sequencing so unique?
Yeah, so a lot of the scholars of tafsir, like Imam Razi and others, they actually ask that question, and they kind of reflect on that it's interesting, right? Because you would think it's created, like you just said, created the human being and then taught him the Qur'an, but it says taught them the Qur'an, taught the Qur'an, and then it says created the human being.
Before creation, taught the Qur'an.
Yeah, interesting.
So one answer to that question, which is a more kind of like technical theological question, and that was the Qur'an, which is the knowledge of God, it predates the human being, so that's why Allah says. But then it would have just said like, you know, the Qur'an was there, but why say taught the Qur'an? Yeah. And one of the points that he makes there is that the scholars of tafsir make there, one of the points they make there is that the only way to be a real human being in the full meaning of the word, to realize your humanity, the dignity, the honor, the prestige, the purpose, the meaning that being a human being has. The only way to realize that is by and through the Qur'an. That a physical, what looks like a human being, what walks like a human being, without the Qur'an, the beliefs, the values, the morals, the ethics of the Qur'an is not really a human being. It's basically just, it's like an animal that walks on twos. It's a creature, like in the English sense of the word, not in our Arabic logical sense. Because haywan natiq, right? Like, oh, all human beings are animals. No. I mean it in like our English, like colloquialisms. He's not a human being, he's a creature. You know when you call somebody a creature, you're talking down.
You take away all humanity from them.
Yeah.
It's interesting because even in the studies of what we view to be like a virtuous human being, in the academic sense, they say it's the humanities. Right? So it's interesting because you want to reach the ultimate form of humanity through things like, and the humanities include expression.
Yes.
It's interesting, the ability to speak and articulate.
Allamahul bayan.
Yeah, Allamahul bayan. So I was going to ask you, Mufti Sahib, how does that now close that 360 loop, right? So you have the Qur'an being taught, but the real human being is the one who is aware of their purpose via the Qur'an. But now the third part of it is, he taught them how to speak. What's the weight of this ayah in that context?
Well, one of the things that I heard my teacher saying is that if we look at the insan, the human being, and what makes the human being different from all other creation in this dunya, it's the ability to articulate. Other animals may have ideas, we just don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Other nations that have existed in the past, maybe, you know, whatever they were, whatever creation Allah sent, we don't know, but we know the insan has bayan. Allah Azza wa Jal gave us the ability to speak, to talk about our workouts, to talk about our dinners, to talk about our vacations. And so now if you work backwards, first of all, speech in itself is a massive blessing. Something that I was reflecting on, one of our good friends, it's not even my place to say it because it's a personal, private affair, so I'll keep it vague for that reason. But one of our friends, his father didn't have the ability to speak throughout his life. But the amazing blessing was that even though he wasn't able to read the Qur'an or speak, his son turned out to be one of the great reciters of the Qur'an.
Amazing.
How like Ajib.
Yeah.
He said to me that my father used to hold the Qur'an and run his fingers through the lines like this, to fulfill his right of the Qur'an. He couldn't read it though. He had no idea what it said because he was born without being able to speak.
Yeah.
And his son then goes on to become a reciter of the Qur'an. It's like
voice. One of my favorites. And his dad never heard him. Can you imagine that? But in Jannah. And his father passed away. Allah yarhamu. But it's incredible, the ability to articulate.
Also, I wanted to clarify, like, his recitation is one of my favorites. I don't know about him, though.
Okay, you can see how close we are to him.
Yeah.
Obviously very close, otherwise Shaykh would not be taking a shot at him. But
It's called catching a stray.
yeah, he caught us straight big time. He's not even here right now, Miskeen. But the point being, the beautiful point that Mufti Sahib is articulating,
Yes.
right, in this concept of articulation, is that it is such a profound gift.
It is.
It is such a profound gift to be able to articulate, to be able to express how many hearts have been able to find relief through talking, right? How many people have been able to share and build through communication. It's something that's unique to the human being. Also, one of the things that...
One other thing that one of the scholars of tafsir wrote about that Allamahul Bayan, that gift of articulation that belongs to the human being. The Qur'an says, وَمِن شَيْءٍ لَا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُمْ. Everything praises Allah.
Yes.
Like everything praises Allah, but the human being has the unique ability to actually utter the actual words of Allah. We actually get to recite the actual speech of Allah, and so all of the other creation envies the human being. That you get to, like, out of this filthy mouth, you get to actually say the actual words of Allah.
there's a friend of mine, Shaykh.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have this experience or not. I definitely do not have this experience. There's a friend of mine who owns a cat. So he says to me that when I read,
2 out of 3 people.
2 out of us, yeah.
he said when I read the Quran, the cat sits next to me.
100% every time.
For sure.
Every day. My Muhammad, like, he's doing tahfiz, right? Remember, your boy's memorizing. When he's like sitting at home and he's like repeating it, they come and they just all sit right here. And they just sit there.
The Dawood Warnsby song?
I have.
Love to hear Quran?
Of course I have.
It's true.
What?
The song Animals Love to Hear Quran. Try it out someday.
Oh, I haven't heard this song.
Listen
Yeah.
carefully to every word you say. Yeah. Dawood
No
Warnsby,
way.
man.
It's very nice.
Yeah. It's
That's
beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah. So you're right. No. Our cats for sure, they come
All the
whenever-
time.
Whenever Musa's reviewing for his lesson at school,
All the
or
time.
whenever when you're praying. Oh my gosh.
Every time.
If you're praying on the janamas,
So we have the ability to articulate our tasbih
Yeah.
and tahmeed and takbir of Allah, and the animals are able to come and they must be envious that, wow, look at this insan. He's able to praise Allah like this.
Yeah.
Amazing.
SubhanAllah. And this is one of the big blessings I think Ramadan particularly brings out
Yes.
is because people's attachment to the Quran. It's almost like
It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's
All the
everywhere.
time. It's in your car, it's at home, the kids
Yeah.
are reading it, you come to the masjid, the imam is reciting it. It's like Quran, 24/7
You
Quran.
in the Muslim world, you walk into a coffee shop, they're playing Quran.
Yeah.
Even though typically you wouldn't do that because you want to have respect for it.
Sure.
But that month is the month where it's like everyone's on the same page.
We know that even no one's going to neglect it.
Yes.
That is the month. Everyone knows this is the month of the Quran. So
Yeah.
you want to, even if it's playing somewhere outside that normally where it wouldn't be, everyone's ears are looking for the Quran.
Everyone's tuned to it.
When the Ramadan that we moved into the campus, so they put the speakers outside.
Yes.
And so that's something people always note is that when they're coming in for like Taraweeh and stuff, and they can just start hearing it from their cars
Yeah.
in the parking lot,
Yeah.
people always mention that thing. So it's like people just enjoy just hearing the Quran from all sides.
Last Friday when I was walking around, the police officer was outside. He's not Muslim. And yet.
Yet. Growth mindset.
No, but the story's crazy. We here at 30 minutes before our khutbah, we have a recitation for
Surah
the Surah Kahf, ta'liman, so that people can come and learn and practice in the sunnah for doing it. If the big obstacles, I don't know it, so I can't do it. So we say, okay, we'll read it. You follow along. And I heard the police officer humming along.
No way.
Yeah, with our Hafiz Sahib here. And I went to him and I said, hey, you want some coffee inside? He said, no, I'm good. And I heard him as he walked away. He's like humming along because, Hafiz AbdelRahman, his voice is beautiful, mashallah. So the reality is this is it's a penetrating experience. The Quran is a penetrating
That's amazing.
experience. And people, subhanAllah, like Imam Razi says, they only reach their full potential of humanity when they understand the weight of the Quran that has been given to them. What are some things, we're going to wrap up now here, but I wanted to leave all of us with some thoughts about and reflections on what are some ways in which we can increase our gratitude to Allah Ta'ala for these essential gifts. The surah is filled with reminders, and then the question, the challenge, which one are you going to deny? in this month of Ramadan, we're approaching the end of it now, how can we become more grateful year round? What are some practical ways? Of course, there's always like the sort of textbook answers. Oh, be grateful, say thank you, this and that. But what are some deep changes that we can make? Even one change where you can become more grateful of a person.
I have one I'll start off with.
Yeah,
Start figuring out what the blessings actually even are. Start asking yourself, what are my blessings?
Yeah.
What do I even consider a blessing? Like, I'm looking at my hands here for a moment. Like, I have skin, like we were mentioning earlier.
Yeah,
like, that's a blessing. Nails, that's a blessing. What do you want me to look at? What do you want me to point out? I don't even know what my blessings are.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is, in order for blessings, a person to be grateful for the blessings, you have to first know what the blessings are. And a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reeling someone into His mahabbah is that He starts allowing them to recognize His favors.
Allah.
Once you start counting the favors, you're going to be a big person.
Can you repeat that line again? A sign that Allah is pulling a person into His love?
He allows them to start seeing His blessings.
Wow.
The blinds are lifted.
Yeah.
And when you start looking for them, that person's destined to big things.
Mm-hmm.
Something great's going to come out of them.
Awareness is the first step.
Right.
Shaykh, anything?
Yeah. So, the talking about gratitude, Surah Ar-Rahman, 31 times. It's basically saying, like, as we say a lot of times, it's a silly expression, fake it till you make it. You sometimes have to just kind of like say it. So you keep repeating, even though you haven't fully internalized it, you don't believe even yourself yet.
Yeah.
I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed. I'm very blessed. I'm really lucky. I'm very fortunate. Whatever somebody's way of doing that is, or specifically like mentioning blessings. But the more you say it, and that's why Imam Ghazali he got that inspiration from the Qur'an, Surah Ar-Rahman, where he said, when the tongue says something 1,000 times, the heart says it once.
Yeah. Sometimes the heart leads and the body follows, but a lot of times the body has to lead and the heart will follow. And it's one of those cycles. Mufti Sahib, you mentioned something that I'm going to kind of build off of, which is one of the great obstructions in gratitude is complaining.
Yeah.
And a person will simply, it's like you pour a nice glass of something and then you just pour it out.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. So you can be grateful, but then you can complain as much as or more than you're grateful, and you're at a net negative.
Yeah.
And a person actually ends up thinking of themselves as ungrateful, not because they don't recognize the blessings, but because you just simply complain too much.
Yeah.
My wife's grandfather, one time, he's a very happy guy. He passed away. May Allah have mercy on him. He passed away. And his wife used to be like kind of upset that he was so happy. So he was jolly, and she was a little bit more serious, and he would never be bothered by anything. So then one time she said to him something to the effect of like, you don't take anything seriously. We have so many problems, and you're just making jokes and laughing, and you seem too lighthearted, easygoing. What's wrong with you? And he said, if I were to spend all of the time that I have thanking Allah for what He gave me, I would run out of the day and my life before I could start complaining to Allah. Like, I have no time to complain. And I think for our generation in particular, and those who follow, especially us in the West, complaining is seen as a sign of realism. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you just stay real quiet? Because, and this is why, when you look at Gaza, when you look at the scenarios around the world, Gaza, Sudan, the Uyghurs, the Burmese refugees, when you look at all of this, the only statement that should come to your mind and heart is, I have nothing to complain about.
Alhamdulillah.
I have nothing to complain about.
Alhamdulillah.
My kids, we travel the world, and we will look at Muslim countries and we'll visit and we'll enjoy some food, and then we'll walk out of the restaurant and we'll see someone asking for food. And my kid, who is just kind of not picky, but just like, this and that, quiet. I don't have to say anything. They don't have to say anything, but the lesson was received. So I think, especially in Ramadan, subhanAllah, what a better month for us to, number one, be aware, right? Be completely aware. As Shaykh is mentioning, be a person that appreciates the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that actually actively does that. And then the third is, don't destroy your gratitude by complaining about Allah. Don't destroy it. Just focus on the good and be patient with the bad. It's a reality. Be patient with the bad. Say alhamdulillah ala kulli hal and move forward, inshallah. We ask Allah ta'ala to give us gratitude, inshallah, in this month and beyond. Jazakallah khairan.